Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the January 22nd, 2024 Public Safety Committee meeting. We have two items on our agenda this afternoon. The first one is an executive regulation for 1523, which is new home builders and sellers registration and warranty. And the second one is for the Police Accountability Board's annual report. We had Mr. Maya did the first packet, Ms. Farag did the second packet, and as we begin, I wanted to thank both of them very publicly for doing an excellent job in giving us the information. And with that, I don't know who is, Mr. Maya, did you want to come down for the first one? And I don't know if anybody else is joining you at that point. Yes, I see other people will be joining you.
Dr. Friedman and Mr. Buell.
Gentlemen, how are you? Welcome to the meeting. Unless the committee has any opening remarks, we're going to go right to you.
Okay. All right. I'll just do a quick overview of the packet before we turn it over to the department for questions and any information the committee would like to hear. This regulation is implementing Bill 3118, which was approved in February 2019. What the bill did, and what the regulation enhances upon, is it changes the previous new home builder licensing process to a registration process, and it also the regulation in particular, it clarifies how the process works in terms of documentation required, timelines, things like that, and also established a new fee structure for those registrants, both builders and sellers. The Department of Office of Consumer Protection is responsible for administering this process, and they are the ones that drafted the regulations. This regulation is a Method 2 regulation, so Council will need to affirmatively approve or disapprove the regulation before it takes effect. And the purpose of today's briefing is to answer any questions, provide information. From staff's perspective, this is a very technical, process-oriented regulation. The most substantive change is really the new fees that are being established for new home sellers who are registering for the first time as well as renewing. With that, turn over to the department if they have any comments or
Please.
Overview.
Good afternoon. If you could introduce yourself, Mr. Friedman.
Good afternoon. I'm Eric Friedman, Director of the Office of Consumer Protection.
Good afternoon. My name is Samuel Buell, Operations Administrator for the Office of Consumer Protection.
Very good. Welcome. Thank you. Did you have some additional information, or?
No, we're just happy to answer any questions you have. Registering new home builders is a big job. It's something that our office has been doing for a long time. The state of Maryland also registers new home builders, and we certainly understand when there's so many pages in the packet that it can be kind of scary to take a look at it. But that's because it sort of has the old COMAR in there on top of the new stuff. And I think Mr. Naim did an excellent job with the packet because it really accomplishes a lot of things. And he's organized that perfectly. It's on the pages 2 and 3. It really addresses the business model, as he has here, reviewing the registration program, permits, and general updates. So it's a whole lot of things put into one packet, which we can understand makes it look like a lot.
Let me and thank you for all of your work on this as well. We realize this is not always easy, but is this legislation covered in the municipalities? Are the municipalities under this legislation?
Yes, they're there. With everything that we do, they have to adopt it as well. But our office has been registering new home builders for.
But they're not automatically covered. Is that what you just said? They have to adopt it as well?
I believe they have to adopt it.
So my point on that, I thought that was right. Someone needs to, once this gets finalized, someone needs to remind our good friends from the municipalities that they have or whatever changes are there, so that they're aware to adopt, if they would like, but I would believe they would like, to adopt this legislation. Because it gets confusing, and I know you do the consumer work for, I know Gaithersburg, I don't know about Rockville, but, so anyhow, if you could do that, please. And then, what happens if someone sells without registering?
Well, it depends.
That one you knew. I could see the look on your
Yes.
face.
Because those are,
Yeah, you were waiting for that.
Yes.
Yeah, you saw that pitch coming.
exactly, those are the things that we deal with every day. So it really depends on the status of the applicant or who they are in the process. We register new home builders who are builders who actually construct, get the permits, and build the homes that are to be
And Sam,
sold.
can I ask you to pull your mic just a little, or you
Yes.
lean in a little bit more?
No
Thanks.
problem. So we do register the builders who actually construct the actual residence. We also register the sellers who are not necessarily the builders. You can have a partnership where a group of people or a group of entities decide that they want to own property speculatively and sell homes on it. They contract with a registered new home builder, but the property is held by the entities that partner together to sell it. Either they subdivide it or they just sell the lots directly. So we directly register the builders who actually build the entities and the sellers who are on the documents hold title to the property that is to be conveyed to a seller, to a consumer. So depending on the status or who this entity is, that's reflective of what the process will look like. So if you're a builder and you fail to register, your registration becomes invalid. You have 30 days from when it's supposed to expire to register. And a builder who doesn't register and they sell a property, they're in violation of the law. And our business education registration unit handles the compliance issues related with that.
And if a builder is also the seller, do they need to get both sides of the permit?
They only need to get one.
They only need
If you are the builder and you also hold title to the property, then you only have to register as a new home builder. A seller doesn't build. A seller
Right, I understood
holds the
that,
property.
yeah.
So a builder who is a builder and a seller only needs to register as a builder.
And how many new home construction permits were issued? And one of the questions was over the last 10 years. I don't know if you have all the information, but whatever you have on that, please.
Certainly. So we don't directly track the number of new homes that are registered, but using the permitting data from the Department of Permitting Services, I was able to look at the information since January 16th of 2014, and it looks like from the permits, we had 5,366 new home permits that were finalized, and that's a way that we were able to approximate the number of new homes built. Because the process is when you get a permit, the builder applies for a permit, and ultimately at the end of this new home construction process, they have the final inspection, and that final date is usually when the county's the Department of Permitting Services has reviewed the build and has cleared it for use and occupancy. So by filtering that data to only include the permits that were issued final inspection dates, we were able to come to the 5,366 number since approximately January 16th of 2014 for 10 years.
And how much have you collected with the fee structure as it is right now?
Certainly. So over that same time, we have collected about $727,560 in combined new home builder registration and new home seller fees.
And according to, I guess it's page 1 here, or page 2, the suggested raise for the fee would be for the seller to go from $100 to $250,
Yes.
but nothing for the builder. No additional for
No
the
addition
builder,
for
which
the
is
builder.
right now, what is it, $805?
That is correct.
And is the reason, and not that I'm opposed to the increased fee, but is the reason for the increased fee to take up for what actually, closer to what it actually costs us to do this line of work?
Absolutely. That's the rationale for increasing the fee. There's a two-tiered. So our staff sees about, on average, 50 new home seller registrations a year, but we see so many more new home builders. When it comes to the new home seller side of it, though, the amount of work that we have to do at the business education registration unit is still the same. About a day's work to determine the compliance issues related to a applicant. So we decided that it should be reflective more of the actual time that's spent on these fees. But we also wanted to make it so that when an entity renews, that it's better, rather than always submitting these single-purpose entities that are 2-year registrations. So a lot of builders have adopted a process in which they will have one land acquisition entity, an LLC, and they keep renewing that one. So we wanted to make sure that those who do have a renewal and they don't keep creating new one-off special purpose entities have a reduced fee schedule. So we wanted to make it so renewals are at $250 and anything that's new is at $400.
All right, and it's one more question with 2 parts to it. For permitting, when somebody comes in and says, look, I want to build a new house, does permitting communicate with you that that's taken place?
Our Bear unit looks into, we have access to the Department of Permitting Services N4 system, so they don't necessarily tell us someone filed a new home building permit or submitted one. But when someone comes to our office and says, I want to register as a builder, our team does do that due diligence and does do that review. We look into the permitting system, we look at the interested parties that were on the application, we see how many permits they pulled in the currently or in the past, and then we determined through some compliance efforts whether there was past non-compliant activities for us to address with the applicant while we have them.
And the second part of that is in the municipalities. Are you communicating with them as well? Because it's a separate permit.
Yeah, in order to build still, like in Rockville, for instance, you still have to be registered with our office. So we do communicate and have had a consistent presence in communication with some of our municipalities, particularly the city of Rockville. They were a great partner. And there are sometimes we do have some interesting builder scenarios.
Aren't you diplomatic? Go ahead.
some scenarios that involve a little bit more tact, so we do involve and do contact our partners and see if we can understand the history a little bit better.
What you might want to do is when they have a permit, of course it used to be a paper type of thing, it's now online I'm sure, but it might be a note on there that says, oh, by the way, you need to get this permit from Montgomery County before you can sell this piece,
Right.
Do whatever you need to do.
So our business education and registration unit, I keep saying them and I keep alluding to them because they are the forefront of this process. At first we were the business compliance unit, and then we've learned that education and communicating to the applicants is a better way to get corrective action. So we changed the name to Business Education and Registration. So we educate first, and that's what our unit does. And so in situations such as what you are suggesting, when we do see an applicant come in and we do our due diligence and see that they're building in the city of Rockville, we double check to make sure they are okay, in other areas, educate them through the process, and then we make it so that it's very easy for them to contact us if they have any questions.
Thank you very much. Please.
As part of the educational outreach piece, would you also be reaching out to title attorneys and settlement companies since they're an inherent part of this whole system?
Yes, we do have an vision to expand some of our education and outreach. We have worked with realtors and title companies in the past. We haven't processized it yet, but it's something that we want to definitely expand the scope of. We send, on average, I'm looking at the numbers, about 100 pieces of communication a month on average. So we do want to find a way to make it more effective, that we're reaching the people who really have the ability to correctly identify the type of property. The issues that we sometimes see, someone may build a resale home and advertise it as new. That's incorrect. That's against the law. So that we determined that sometimes it's the realtor who makes an honest mistake.
Sure.
They just listed it incorrectly. So we do have an idea on how to utilize and how to engage with those partners to make sure that they understand the requirements of our law. We're going to work on making it more scalable and get it out there soon. To talk more with the title companies and the realtors.
You kind of anticipated my next question, which is beyond the scope of this piece, but it's related there too, which is there are a bunch of situations where it's not new construction, but it is substantially new. Let's put it that way, right? It's the skeleton was left, and the whole insides were changed, and so on and so forth. And a house built in the 1950s is now a totally different thing. This is beyond, or that's not covered by this, because this only applies to new home construction. But there are a lot of those situations where it's similar where a real estate company buys the property and then it's a related entity that does the full remodel and then it is sold. And so just to keep in the back of our minds, is that something that you think there is a significant amount of in the county that would warrant us looking at that in terms of consumer protection from that aspect of things? Whoop, sorry.
Well, yeah, that's a very good point. In fact, the last time we were before the council was regarding that exact issue. We worked and were able to change the definition of demolish, which was something that was a problem with respect to the way we were coordinating things with the Department of Permitting Services. So, just for way of context, is the world used to be simple. When somebody said they were
How
a
far
builder,
back you going? No, I'm
Well-
scared.
a few years back, when someone would say that they are a new home builder, that meant that they owned a piece of land,
Right.
that they built a house, and then they sold the house. Well,
Right.
that is no longer the situation because many companies will use different entities, limited liability corporation, to own the house, to own the property, and things of that sort. So what Samuel Buo has been doing with the program and has to consistently do is keep up with things that are changing.
Right,
And
right.
so we have to address all these different situations where you have a owner of the property who is technically the seller, and that the builder built the house but is not selling the house because the LLC is selling it. So
Right.
we had to address that. And so they're constantly moving in terms of different ways that the business model works. And so another one that we had to address as well is situations when they're just renovating a house or not actually constructing a whole new home. So that's a lot of what we have to do, but we're very proud of it in Montgomery County because we do more than any other jurisdiction in the state to make sure that there's a fair building situation for all the builders, and also fair for consumers. We want to make sure that they are receiving the kinds of warranties and guarantee funds that they're entitled to. So that's the sort of thing that we have to do, and Samuel and his unit have really been staying up to date, putting that update, and making the changes that are just constantly needed.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, we're good. So are you looking, this is an update, or do you need anything from us other than,
No, since I've not heard any amendments or proposed amendments to the regulation, it can go to full council for a vote.
okay. First off, let me thank you, Mr. Maya. And Eric and Sam, thank you all very, very much for what you do, not just on this topic, but in general. You've heard this committee say many times, you do so much with a very small staff, and you affect so many lives. But we sincerely appreciate it, and we thank you for your good work, and you know where to find us if you have any additional thoughts on what we should be doing as suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we're going to move right along. Maybe, if I can figure out how to use this computer. Ms. Farag, would you like to join us, please? And Mr. Walker, I believe if you could please join us as well. And I don't know if Ms. Berry wants to come down and be with us as well. Anybody else that was here that wanted to be with us is certainly welcome. This is the update on the Police Accountability Board. It's the annual report. And we're going to ask Ms. Farag to lead us through the packet. But I did want to say in the beginning on this, thank you all very, very much for what you're doing. As you know, when our good friends from the state decided that we were going to be in this line of work, and how they gave us a lot of information, but they didn't give us enough information on how to begin and how to continue. And we, I think maybe we're the first in the state to come up with a board, or if not, we were one of the first. We have worked. You all have worked diligently to make sure that what we are doing is what the state had in mind. And unless there's questions or statement from the committee? I'm going to ask Ms. Farag to lead us through.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to give a bit of a brief overview and then turn it over to the Police Accountability Board. This board was required by state legislation as part of the Police Accountability Act of 2021 that had repealed the disciplinary scheme for police officers, the LEOBR, and replaced it with a different framework. There's discipline that occurs within the department, and discipline, anything that has to do with a resident or a community member, is automatically referred to the Police Accountability Board and their Administrative Charging Committee. So the county in 2021, I believe, 2022, created this as required by state law, the Police Accountability Board and its Administrative Charging Committee. It is staffed and it does have a budget, and members are paid, I would say, a stipend rather than a salary, but they are paid. And the biggest police department in the county is obviously Montgomery County Police. They did not fall under the ACC's jurisdiction until 2023 because their collective bargaining agreement didn't expire till then. So they are now there, and the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee are now seeing more of a full complement of work to do. The PAB issued their annual report in December. I have linked that to Save Trees. I hope you were able to access it online. But they can give you an overview of what they've done over the past couple of years, what they plan to do. I'm particularly interested from a budget perspective on any particular resource needs they need, both to be able to transmit information to the public in a more transparent way, or I should say easily accessible way, because it is transparent. But and whether or not, now that they've got a fuller caseload, whether or not they need additional resources to handle those cases in a timely manner.
Thank you. And I think this needs to also be mentioned that this is maybe the only board that covers the municipal police forces and the sheriff and everyone else. I mean, usually they're their own entities and handle their own discussions. So, and with that, Bishop or Ms. Ms. Berry, are you going to lead this off? Who's going to lead this off? Mr. Walker?
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, everyone. I had to do that too. I had to check my watch.
Had to double check. Good afternoon, everyone. Of course, Chairman Katz, Councilman Lincoln, and Councilman Letke, thank you for having us. The PAB appreciates this opportunity to present our 2023 annual report to the Public Safety Committee. Thank you again for having us today. Beside me, two of my board members. I'll let them introduce themselves. We have...
I am Ken Kilner. I am resident of Silver Spring, Maryland, Vice Chair of the Police Accountability Board.
Next to him.
My name is George Uedes. Serving as a parliamentarian for the board, also a resident of Germantown.
Good.
And
thank you all for what you're doing too.
And as an introduction, because I didn't do, because you're so used to hearing your own name, but Bishop Paul Walker, I'm the chairman of the Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee. Here today, we're going to try to provide a brief snapshot of our robust report. We try to go into how we can summarize the report and kind of clarify why we're making some of the recommendations that we're making today.
Please.
I'm going to let my parliamentarians start off with, I think, some lead points, and we're kind of go here today because we've been working cohesively as an awesome team. It's been, as I often say in the beginning, we've been painting a moving train. It's, especially as the chair said, the state didn't really provide true guidelines and parameters, but I think we've have reached some real pinnacle points to make an impact here in the county. So, George?
I like that expression, painting a moving train. We always say flying the plane as we're building it. Yeah, but same idea. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we've all heard and felt sort of any of the both expressions, all of the above, as we've sort of adventured into this endeavor. So, to follow up on Bishop Walker's sort of outline here, I'm going to provide a little bit of a snapshot on one of the recommendations that we're making, and I believe maybe this is one of Ms. Farag's questions as well coming up, which is as it relates to the recommendation of the PAB to create and deploy a public-facing complaints dashboard. There are a couple of initiatives that we're following here, I guess, in terms of technology, and the dashboard is one of them. The dashboard, as you'll see in our report, is meant to capture and to track the complaints that we receive and along a sort of host of variables. For example, the ethnicity or race of the complainant, the time of day when the complaint was issued, the time of the event, where it took place, and a whole host of other variables that we are currently tracking. And so I would say that there are at least a couple of initiatives as it relates to that. The dashboard in and of itself, we'll call it the complaint dashboard, from our perspective should have an internal to the PAB facing image or capability. And what we're recommending in our annual report is that it also contains a public facing version. The only difference here being the ensuring that sensitive or personally identifiable information is not out there in the public. So the point of that would be to first, as it sort of says in our mission here, transparency, to be transparent about what complaints we're receiving from our LEAs and partners, and by doing that, increase the awareness of the public on policing overall in the county, as well as the work of the PAB and subsequently the ACC. So that's one of the recommendations that we're making. The second side, or the other side of that coin, is what we would call, I suppose, a portal, a complaint portal, and that is an effort to build a system whereby residents who submit complaints can track their complaints, can track the status of their complaints, and sort of see this online. So both of these efforts require technical expertise that we currently do not possess within the PAB, and because of that, there are recommendations that we're making as it relates to how we can ensure that this, this recommendation, that this tool can be deployed. In brief here, just to close things up, we have worked with the TEBS team on this, and what you see in the report is a preliminary version. We'll call it a working version of the dashboard. There are suggestions and edits that we as board members have communicated to the TEBS team. We also understand that TEBS is a very valuable resource, and as such, they have a lot of priorities. And so from our point of view, what we are recommending as it relates to the dashboard, keeping in mind this has been something that we've worked on for the past year at least, to try to bring this to the finish line, we would suggest or recommend either a dedicated TEBS or technical support personnel that can assist us in the deployment of this, or our own ability to outsource this work, within the laws and regulations of the county, but outsourcing this to a third-party provider that can take this data, again, within those parameters and execute on the dashboard. From our understanding, of course, there's a cost to everything, but as an estimate, we're thinking with more research to be done, if that's the route that we want to take in terms of outsourcing, this would probably take a few weeks' time, and probably around, this is a ballpark estimate, so don't hold me to it, maybe along the lines of $10,000 worth of work for the dashboard itself, not the portal. Again, I'm just offering this as a little bit more detail into where we stand and why we're recommending either alternatives here.
All right, and for the $10,000, and I guess I'm turning to Ms. Berry. Whenever there's money involved, we turn to Ms. Berry, you know that. But for the $10,000 involved, who's going to keep up the dashboard? Is that you?
Definitely not me.
Okay.
Definitely not me. Fatma Berry, Executive Director of
Thank you.
Police Accountability Board and the Administrative Charging Committee. Keeping up the dashboard obviously will not be me. It will be either TEPS or an outside entity, a third-party entity. So the board has worked very, very closely with TEPS, with me. They've been very hands-on in trying to get this done. And I think it's, at the end of the day, they just want to make it transparent and make it more available to the public.
And we agree with that. I mean, I'm saying we. They would hit me on both sides if they disagreed. And did TEBS give you an indication that they could keep up the dashboard, or how did, in your discussions?
Okay, we're looking at different avenues. So
Okay.
they've indicated that they can do it, but again, it has to come with a special cost, and work with a third party. So I know that they're set up to do that also in the discussions, that they're set up to work with a third party or just keep it within themselves. But again, the goal for the PAB is that they want to have a centralized location,
Absolutely.
a system to make sure that all the work they're doing and all the communications they're having with the public is transparent and positive, and they can pull together the information they need
And
to present.
that's obviously your goal as well. So, Ms. Frog, what would be the next step on that?
So I don't know what types of preliminary discussions the PAB has had with the Office of Management and Budget to determine what their FY25 fiscal request will be for their budget. The next steps really would be looking at that during the budget process.
During the budget, okay, which is much faster, it's coming up much faster than we all want to admit to. So, okay, that makes sense.
And again, I know we've said this more than once as George talked and in your answer to Fadmata, but just adding as many as exclamation points as possible, this would definitely help the PAB become a lot more transparent, giving access to not only LEAs, but mainly our public, in which we were being created to serve. So,
And if I may, just so that as we are talking about the budget, so we don't sort of put down that the PAB is asking for $10,000.
Right.
They're not asking for $10,000. It was just
discussion.
as George said, it was just a discussion. Sort of he's just coming up with maybe, but we'll look more closely into it and have more numbers for you
And I
guys.
know you're not shy, and you shouldn't be,
No.
but we need to know that early on, as early on as we can.
Okay.
So that
Sounds
we
good.
can be prepared. Everybody wants to do the right thing. We just have to know what you need and how much it's going to cost.
Thank you.
Please, if you're going to, I know you want to speak. Yeah, okay. Okay. Did you? No, okay. Go ahead.
okay. And again, you're right. And at this point, I think that's what we, the PAB, have concluded, that we want to take this opportunity to kind of throw everything out there that we think we would need, because we are setting precedent as the first police accountability board, in this one, with others in the state here in Montgomery County. So we want to make sure that those that would follow us will have greater success, because we built a foundation in which they can continue to build, that flying plane or that painting that moving train. So,
We can paint the plane.
Yeah,
We're
so-
Montgomery County. We can do it different.
absolutely. So next, I want to introduce our vice chair, who's worked hard, as well as our parliamentarian, and kind of talk about some of the things in reference to, as you saw in the report, about our complaints. Okay.
Thank you very much again for having us and for your time and for reading our report and hearing our thoughts today. We greatly appreciate it. This follows on what George went through and explained, the need for and purposes of the dashboard. But I mean, just, numbers that you've seen in the report about the numbers of complaints filed concerning police and the numbers that the Administrative Charging Committee has reviewed. Those numbers are not going to go down. And it's because a lot of reasons, one of them which is that we've made it a priority, consistent with our mandate, to let people know how to file complaints. We've done oversight in terms of making sure there's compliance with the laws and rules about access for information about to file complaints. It doesn't mean reflect on police conduct, but we are receiving more complaints to look at. We have done a lot to reach out, and we're doing more in that area. So we're going to have more complaints filed. With that means that we're going to have work to do with respect to those complaints that come in, handling them, reviewing the outcomes, doing research to make recommendations, possibly for statutory or other administrative changes, to carry out our work. And, this is going to require, in our view, some additional capabilities. And, we think there's going to be the need for, additional staff resources to handle us, to help us out in terms of, drafting decisions, to communicate with law enforcement agencies, to keep helping as we do our outreach. Because, as our reach out initiatives continue, the work of the PAB and the ACC are definitely going to grow. We don't know what the end is going to be, but to reach that point and to have more polished recommendations for you a year from now, resources will be needed in our view.
And I think, and obviously you touched on it, but there was, up to this point, there's been about 75 complaints, and 14 went to the ACC for review. And we understand you're going to need additional resources, and there again, that's a budgetary discussion. But to the idea that you're dealing with the different sizes police forces, one size does not fit all probably in anything, but especially this one. Is there a need for special resources, or whatever the right term would be, for the other departments that you're dealing with?
I think the needed resources, and I'm not sure if I would fall on the terminology of special. I'm not sure where you are with that, but
It's unique resource, whatever.
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
In reference to the MCPD, which is, of course, the
Right.
largest
Right.
municipality. In our findings thus far this year, we see that the capabilities that would be afforded us with additional staffing of a project manager, an extra researcher, to help us, get back the research that we need. For the first year, a lot of the PAB members themselves were working very hard in collecting this own research on their own, as well as in partnership with the executive director. But as full-time professionals, it's a little difficult to put in that much time and really make a real impact. So we do see that the smaller municipalities, I think, once we address the larger, it kind of will fit in the category of addressing that unique or special need of some assistance and in our recommendation, as you saw in the report. If that answers your question, sir. Yes, please.
I just want to follow up on, just an observation at least I've had, maybe other members of the board has had as well, that we meet quarterly with all the police chiefs in one room, publicly. We have, I think, a very good dialogue with them. We've, initiated a practice of letting know ahead of time what we're going to ask about so we can make the most of the time we have together. And I think that we're coming to appreciate, and we'll still appreciate more, the different needs and, missions of the different jurisdictions and how they relate. And maybe later on we'll be able to better answer, your specific question.
And obviously, experience does matter, and it certainly matters in this one. I mean, not that just because it happened before that it's going to happen again in this situation, but it gives you a pretty good barometer of what's taking place.
And if you would, I would like to add that in addition, the PAB is strongly in favor of recommending compensation to trial board members. Because as the vice said, and you probably heard even the parliamentarian allude to, that the workload will increase, and it has already in reference to the complaints that are received, the complaints from citizens as well as those that are directly into the LEAs and then to the ACC. So we feel that it would be wise to have, this compensation, whatever way it looks. That would be up to, how you all make that look. But we do favor that for these trial board members. This compensation for the trial board members, we believe, is crucial to ensuring, an equitable representation, fostering diversity, because these unpaid positions, unfortunately, can usually be held by people who can afford to put in time on their own. And those who cannot, will not. And we want to have this diversity, this equitable, this equality in this agenda that the state has set up. So we would like to definitely make sure that we make that clear, that that is one of our recommendations for the trial board members.
And I appreciate that, and if you could, and I don't know what we can afford and what we can't afford and all of that, but I would like to know what your recommendation would be as a number, dollar sign. It doesn't have to be this minute, but yeah.
So we're looking about $500.
If you could come a little
Is
closer.
that okay? Is this better?
Yeah.
Okay. We're looking probably about $500 a day, because each trial, so far we know, is at least 2 days. And for people who have to take off work to be there all day long, we probably aiming at about $500 per day.
And a person that's on the trial board, that 2-day trial board, are they allowed to be on other trial boards that year? How does that work?
So the board is creating a system of choosing. So since right now we only have 2, as of for now, we're just rotating them for now. But the goal is to have a pool of 10, and they are doing the interviews and choosing who they are going to have within their pool of 10 members of the public, and they are creating a system. They, meaning the board, is creating a system of how they will be choosing these people as requests are coming from the LEAs for a trial board member, for public member of the trial board.
Okay. Thank you. Any?
Yes, and again, this measures that we ensure, thorough research and facilitate timely responses and uphold the commitment and the mandate in how we serve both law enforcement agencies and our residents. Because I often say that, sometimes we have to be careful with that terminology when we say LEAs and residents, because it sets a tone as if we're saying them and us or us and them. But we're all one community. They are brothers and sisters, and we're sisters and brothers. So, but again, having this, we believe, will create that diversity and that equitableness in why we're recommending this.
Any additional?
I just wanted to say that the PAB has made great strides in increasing outreach to the community, building relationship with county law enforcement, and sharing legislative policies and recommendations with the county executive, with you, the Public Safety Committee, and with the county council as we build this work. And futuristically, our vision is transformative. A year, we're looking ahead to mark increased visibility, accessibility to the residents, communities of Montgomery County. A key aspect of this vision involves fostering a mature reciprocal relationship between all LEAs, law enforcement agencies, and the residents of Montgomery County, while working to seek opportunities to make recommendations that would make a significant impact in the relationship between law enforcement agencies and the residents of Montgomery County. This is what our mandate is moving forward this year.
Very good.
Are you going to go through the recommendations?
We can go through. I didn't know if you had any statement before the recommendations. Okay, why don't you go through the recommendations, please?
Whoever.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Okay, I'm sorry. I was like, I heard you talking to each other. So, all right, I'm old school. When you look someone in the eye, they're talking to you. So, we can go through these. One of the recommendations that you saw in the report is on the mental health aspect. The research team, which is a team that we created within the PAB, which was called our listening tour team, and then we had other subcommittees who focused on these topics like mental health and body-worn cameras, traffic stops, and records requesting, MPAA or MPIA records. So in the research, the team analyzed the content of 911 calls in Montgomery County and assess the demographic data, what resources were deployed, and root causes to include social and economical conditions such as race, class, gender, etc. The justification reason that we have for this recommendation is in our research, the PAB, in our research of ways to address the police response to mental health crises, we discovered that studies of several cities around the country found an average of 62.6% of calls were for non-criminal calls, and that less than 3% of 911 calls were for violent crimes. We believe that it would be prudent to do a deep dive into the 911 calls here in Montgomery County, and we recommend that increase funding and staffing to the MCOT, the Mobile Crisis Outreach Teams, to ensure community-based crisis response and build trust with the community regarding the effective public safety crisis response, the harm reduction. This will help with preserving public safety resources and address high-level threats and dangers to the public. We know that there are discussions about the MCOT, the MCOT, and we are recommending more funding to ensure their success. Is one of that. The community access data collection, the transparency and policy and is central to building the public trust. A core mission of the PAB in that spirit, the PAB recommends the county creates and/or fund a system by which the public can track their complaints and see their data cases filed. The PAB recommends that the county provide resources to ensure the building of the public interface dashboard. This will ensure the public can keep track of their requests for information the same way in which they can track their court cases. This should help the collection of sharing of data to help residents better understand the work of its police force. During our listening tours, we learned that the public still did not have faith in the system. We believe that transparency will help build that trust. We talked about all of the different integrations of the technology when we heard from our parliamentarian, George. We focused on outreach. The PAB recommends that the county provide more staffing to meet the needs of the PAB and community. The Executive Director's Office is currently a staff of 2, and the PAB is recommending at least 2 more staff members. We believe the Executive Director's Office should hire full-time staff dedicated to outreach, to training, policy research, data collection, and analysis. The PAB requests consistent language, access availability for written documents and meetings, that is in the language Arabic, ASL, American Sign Language, Asian, French, and Spanish. Outreach is essential and central to the PAB's mission. Implementing a more robust educational outreach will help with building trust of the complaint process. To the PAB needs resources to ensure greater accessibility of the complaint form and ways to increase awareness of the PAB and its work. to reach our wide and diverse county, we need a intentional and targeted outreach to allow members of the county, especially those marginalized communities, and that requires these special resources. And this will help the PAB tremendously in our mandate in reaching out to the community, allowing the community to know who we are, what we are, why we're here for. Because our listening to a group that went out, they found that a lot of the residents didn't know the difference between PAB and ACC, or what the PAB did versus what the ACC did. How and where do they file complaints, and where do these complaints go, how they addressed and how they are viewed. So we see this recommendation as a positive to help reach those marginalized communities who don't have internet access every day and all day. And so we had this listened to, and we actually went to those communities and went to those civic leaders. The PAB is recommending a greater transparency and ease of access, and we would say no cost, to ensure that members of the public are not harmed or denied access to their records or needed records due to their lack of financial affordability. The PAB requests information from the chiefs of police regarding this process, and of course we're still waiting for that answer. During the listening tour, it was brought to our attention that, again, the public must pay for police reports. According to members of the public, this has been a stumbling block for many who are low in income and marginalized communities. It costs a prohibitive, and as this cost is really out of their reach, puts them at a disadvantage. We believe we believe in eliminating this cost will help the community and also help build trust. And these are just some of our recommendations. If you look at, again, the report, we made very clear some of our strong recommendations that will help us meet this mandate, help us, again, kind of get into a rhythm of being able to paint this train and fly that plane.
You're going to mention a boat now? Go ahead.
I mentioned a boat. I'll throw that in there with the kitchen sink. But we really believe that it's very important for the public to understand why the PAB is here, what we hear. And this is a case where we are fostering this healthy relationship between the residents and our law enforcement agency with the vision and the hope of melding and becoming that one body, which we are, because we are one community here in Montgomery County. And on the board, we believe that. Most of the board members, all of the board members believe that we are here, and this is an equitable place to live. This is a good and healthy place to live in, and we believe in our law enforcement agencies. But we know that it's a battle, because there's been a lot of distrust out there for years on both sides, some cynicism, a lot of distrust because of systemic racism, and we're not afraid to address that. Yet at the same time, we also are seeing things from the 30,000-foot view on how we can foster this healthy relationship.
Just to let you know, we're not receiving public testimony today. Yeah. This is an update from the panel for the committee. But anyone is always welcome to send in any written thoughts and discussions. Any discussion from the committee?
Sure.
Please.
First, thank you all for the work that you're doing, for putting together a report that is full of recommendations that we can dig into. So wanted to ask about a couple of them, and then I'll get back in the queue. But you mentioned on a couple of different issues, I think, about requests that you have made for pieces of information and data that you haven't gotten yet. Could you break down what you have not received yet, so we can consider how we might assist with that or figure out what's going on?
Sure, I can give you an example, and thank you for your question. So one of the efforts that we're trying to, in terms of what Bishop Walker was mentioning, the ad hoc groups, the board members themselves, and with the help of our staff, going through some of the research. Don't want to beat a dead horse here, but this is why we are requesting for additional staff. One of those initiatives related to body-worn camera footage and review policies. And so we understand that each law enforcement agency has a body-worn camera policy. For the most part, I believe they're all publicly available. However, there were specific questions that we were looking to receive answers on as it relates to the actual review process. So we know that some, for example, I think Councilmember Katz, with regards to your original question on unique needs, there are unique ways in which these law enforcement agencies operate as well. And so, for example, in that body-worn camera policy, some law enforcement agencies have a formal review process, we'll say, with the specific cadence, whether that's once a month or whether, for example, it's driven by the nature of the event. So, for example, whenever there's a use of force case, then that body-worn camera footage is reviewed. That is not consistent across the LEAs. So we've noticed that, and upon noticing that, wanted to get a little additional information as it relates to why that is the case. And we, in our report, made recommendations specific that, specific recommendations that reflected the operations of one specific LEA, a smaller LEA, and how they handle body-worn camera footage. So that's one example of, the specificity, the questions that we're looking at, what, for example, software platforms they're using, what is truly their analytic capability to review footage. One thing is to watch the video, another thing is to, in our opinion, analyze the language that's being used, the de-escalation techniques that are being implemented. Not to say that this is not happening, simply just asking the questions is what the board is doing here. So that's one example. And with regards to that, we've also made recommendations that incorporate technological solutions that assist, that we hope, we believe will assist law enforcement agencies not only in capturing this data and reviewing body-worn camera footage more effectively, efficiently, but also increase the professionalism of the police force by doing so. I'll stop there, but if you have any additional questions, happy to answer.
So do we know, so you're saying that you have requested some of these pieces of information, and have you gotten a rejection or just not a response yet?
Okay, so part of the responses have been, some would just, I guess some pointed to their website where you can get more information, but we have not been able to receive specific information as to that question. The board was trying to do several comparison to a system that they found from an outside jurisdiction that's not in Montgomery County, outside LEA, using a certain program or technology. And I guess they wanted to see what we were doing here in the county from the different LEAs. We have not yet received feedback on what they're doing, whether it's comparison to the Trulio, I think is.
How long ago did you ask for the?
I can check the emails from my SCAA and let you guys know.
Has it been months? Has it been weeks?
It's been a few months. She has sent a few reminders, but we have not received response.
And this is with an LEA that is within Montgomery County?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
If I can just add in there, we're aware of what's in the report, and we are taking a look at our own processes for following up and checking the boxes, and so give us an opportunity to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, of course. And obviously, we just want to make sure, ideally, as you all have been mentioning, all of this is collaborative. This is all for the betterment of a system that's on behalf of our entire community. And so hopefully, obviously government is what it is, and it's not always the easiest thing. But we want to do and see happen whatever facilitation is necessary by all parties to try to help these pieces move quickly and in a timely fashion. Obviously the PAB was established for a reason, and the public has certain expectations, and there's tax money going there and all of those things. So certainly we don't want anybody within the county to be inadvertently or whatever, impeding that or slowing down the work. And so sometimes it's just, a nudge here or there in the right place can be helpful, but certainly I think I would like to know, I would imagine everyone would like to know, if it seems like there's something where a conversation or a nudge might be helpful, or if it has to do with just figuring out a system of collaboration and communication specifically related to these things. But we don't want you all sitting and waiting for information that may or may not be forthcoming. That certainly the public's expectation is going to be that you're able to get your hands on information like that.
I'm interrupting you. I seem like I'm doing a good job of interrupting you. If I don't know how much authority we have over in fact, I don't know that we have any authority over the other agencies, for the, not outside of Montgomery County. But if there's a request and, after a reasonable amount of time, and everybody, I guess we have different definitions of what reasonable amount of time is, but after a reasonable, if there is a problem, if you will let us know so that we could send, as a committee, if we're in agreement, to that entity to say, we know this information has been asked for. We'd appreciate you getting the information. Maybe that would be of assistance. Go ahead.
Yes, definitely. Since we've been working also with the county executive's office to get things moving. So I think that this issue will be resolved probably pretty soon.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you.
I'll interrupt you again. Go ahead.
I'll do one more and then I'll get back in the queue. Okay. Also noting the recommendation related to restorative justice in MCPS, because here's an interesting area, because this is really outside of our purview, except as it comes to before us for budget. But noting that the participants supported restorative justice's practices for students and feared that MCPS is insufficiently committed to those practices. Is there and so your recommendation has to do with bringing together a conversation between MCPS and various other parties. But I just wanted to check if there is on your side a means for getting these recommendations in front of MCPS, or is that something that we should be responsible for doing entirely? Do you know if they're aware of some of the data that you all have gathered from these community conversations and so forth?
Let me just start on that one, because I would like for Executive Director to start on that one about whether or not they receive the information, because once we send it up to the Executive Director's office, they take the lift on getting it out to the various parties that we're recommending that it gets out to.
So I can say that the MCPS has not received an official, because the mandate is to provide recommendations to the county executive
Sure.
and county council, and so the recommendations have gone to the county executive's office and the county council. However, with the information that's in there, obviously it's public in all PAB public venues. So yeah, to that extent it's public, but no, we have not had communications with MCPS directly as of yet, not since the written report.
And I would like to follow up with this, Councilmember Mink, which is one of the reasons why we established the listing to a subcommittee group. And with that is one of the outreach initiatives to go up to the school board, to reach this and to communicate to them what our agenda and what our recommendations are and what our research and findings are. So on our end, that's how we're reaching out to them as a part of our outreach work. So it is a part of our outreach mandate to reach out to them, CPS.
Absolutely, yeah, thanks. And certainly on our part, and I'm also a member, of course, of the Education and Culture Committee, and I will certainly make sure that the MCPS folks see what you've provided here in terms of your recommendations. They may be interested in some more of the data related to that conversation, but certainly the hope would be that as many, obviously, of our entities can benefit from the work that you all have been doing as possible. And with that, I will jump back in the queue.
Yeah. If I may also, just to close on that question, I'd say that it is, the PAVs, our members here, goal to work with you and, widely across the community in terms of executing on, the recommendations that we are making, as well as just conducting the research that we're doing. So as it relates to that, in your offer to work together, certainly I think we're open. We appreciate the opportunity to be here, as Bishop Walker mentioned, and hope that these conversations are fruitful in terms of achieving that objective.
Thank you.
And you will be receiving an email. The light went on as soon as you offer it. I'm like, okay, you'll be hearing from one of our subcommittee chairs of the listening tour, probably sending your email through our executive staff, seeing whatever we can do to meet, to facilitate this and initiate this mutual, reciprocal communication with the MCPS. So thank you for that offer.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. And since we ended on restorative approaches, I'm going to start on restorative approaches. So, that has been required by state law since 2019 for each school system to have restorative approaches implemented within their schools. What I can't recall or don't know sitting here today is whether there is a corresponding state report required on it, right? So there's an annual report that's required for all local school systems related to school discipline. I don't remember whether that was amended to include restorative approaches and use of in the school systems, because over time, once that law was passed in 2019, needed to be able to measure fidelity to implementing it over a span of time. So that would be something that might be useful for y'all to take a look at, and whether that is there. I know the State Department of Education does run the Restorative Approaches Collaborative, where they meet twice monthly with leadership from each of the local education agencies around the state. And again, these are good opportunities for counties to share across counties what's happening. So much like a pad was built, flown, moving in each county at different rates of speed, and people were trying to figure out how to operationalize everything. The same occurred with restorative approaches, and some districts were already using PBIS, some were not, some were using other tools. And how did they said, well, you just told me about PBIS, what is this new thing? It's not a new thing, it's an extra tool in the toolkit. So you just keep adding them in and you deploy them based on what might be best suited to the particular circumstances. So there's like 7 or 8 different things mentioned in the state law that are required to be those tools within that toolkit for folks to use. So that would be interesting to see. And then I know we talked about the body-worn cameras, and I heard this back to Summer Mako. There were some things mentioned at the conference where different jurisdictions were trying to think, hey, wouldn't it be good if we could all get the PABs from each county together and talk through what's working, what's not, where we're hitting hiccups, what we're hearing from the community. And I do think that that would be valuable, because I think that a lot of folks are similarly situated in other jurisdictions, whether they're small or large. There's certain things that, again, you all noticed within the Police Accountability Act as you started to put the thing into motion might be worth talking about. So I think that might be useful. But in thinking about the Police Accountability Act of 2021 and the state's body-worn camera guidance document that was issued in 2016, and at the time the act passed in 2021, the mandate for body-worn cameras had a tiered rollout, if you will, and it applied to county-wide law enforcement agencies. It deliberately did not specify municipal departments. There were reasons for that at the time. That being said, I think that most of our, if not all, of the municipal departments in Montgomery County had them prior to the passage of that act, and so did MCP. But I'd be curious to see based on the 2016 guidance document for implementation of body-worn camera programs and where we are now, and those different documents and things that you're requesting for how they get reviewed, what gaps there were from 2016 that you all know are a problem now that you might want to have fleshed out, because floating those up to the Police Standards Training Commission could be useful in, again, curing an että that may not just be unique to Montgomery County, but might require clarification that could benefit law enforcement agencies and the public statewide. That could be useful. And I appreciate the hustle with which you have functioned this year in getting things up and going. And I know you managed the 4 different community listening sessions over time. I do note that they were very geographically concentrated or very niche in their focus. And so I wondered what could be done to expand the organizational outreach to figure out how to reach more pockets because we're a large county. We are a big county. And noting in the school safety related section that there was commentary about the need to talk to PTA organizations. Well, they're good to talk to just about everything under the sun. And they're very organized and very focused. And HOAs, other community organizations who might want to be heard on this issue. And with respect to the school safety recommendations that were in there that you received feedback on from the 4 listening sessions that you had, I would add that talking to MCEA, MCAP, and SEIU would also be important because those include the full landscape of the school professionals who serve Montgomery County Public Schools, from our bus drivers to our para-educators to our classroom teachers and our administrators. And I think that's a broad coalition of individuals that you should hear from in addition to the PTAs. You referenced, sorry, I've got notes all over the place, but you were talking about police reports and people having concerns to pay for a police report. How do you get a police report? And no doubt that's a really important thing that we need to do a better job of explaining how to go about it, and that you don't have to pay for it if there's an indigency issue. So that they already, I know MCP waives those fees under the Public Information Act, and a police report is a public record, and there's an indigency provision where you don't have to be charged a fee in order to receive the document if there's a financial need. So part of that would be, how do we make sure we're explaining that to people so that they know, because nobody wants to go and feel turned away and you don't know what the next question is to ask, right? So how can we make sure that they know that? And you had a bunch of stuff within the use of force section, and I had some questions about that. So I noted in there, it said that there were questions related to chokeholds and their use, and people not understanding what the council's action did versus what the state's use of force statute is. Did you request the document from MCP that banned chokeholds in 2002? Do you have that?
We did request, but that was a part of our subcommittee group.
Okay.
I'm held by one of, I think it was 3-team member team on that. And, but as of yet, in our possession, we don't have
You don't have it. Okay.
report. I'm not
Okay.
sure with the ED.
Are you asking about the policy itself, or what are you asking?
Well, it seemed like there was confusion about whether or not they were banned in general, which of course under state law, under the updated use of force statute, they are, but MCP banned them in 2002 by policy. So I wanted to know if that was something that came up in your discussions, and if you had the opportunity to review the policy itself.
So, so I think the issue is not so much the policy; it's the implementation of the policy.
Okay.
The issue is whether the public members' concerns during the listening sessions, the listening tours, was whether MCPD was following the policy. Mm-hmm. And not having enough information, they felt, for them to determine that a policy was being followed properly. Not so much whether there's a policy, but whether the policy
Gotcha.
is being implemented properly.
So what do you think might, and this is anybody who wants to answer, what do you think would be most useful for helping explain to the public, like the state's new use of force statute, sort of the history of these things and what has or hasn't happened over time in Montgomery County, so that we focus it on Montgomery County, because that's really important that we're talking about here, not elsewhere. And the state law, of course, saying when use of force may be used, when it has to terminate, if it was used, right? If it was authorized, then when it must terminate, because that's a really important point that, you know, as far as I know, we are the only state in the country that specified that in statute, which is a good thing. And the distinction between lawful use of force and unlawful use of force, what do you think would, based on the listening sessions that you've held, would resonate the most with folks who have these questions to help them understand it?
I'll jump in and say, just to first provide a little bit of context as it relates to the listening tour. So the listening tour is an effort by a few of our board members that started really recently. And the objective here is to listen across sections of the county. Your feedback is well taken there on scaling that up across the county. So just to go back on to re-answer your question, as we start listening and gathering these perceptions and feedback, so it may be that, as you mentioned, it is the fact that this is in the statute. However, the extent to which our community members know that or not.
Right. Exactly.
And for that reason, what they're expressing to our community members in terms of the listening tour. And so our effort, our objective with that is to gather as much feedback as possible and subsequently provide you and also, you know, the county executive with ways in which we believe we can better educate or better make aware the public of these changes. You know, our efforts going through these communities, just the same way that we are listening, but providing information and educating the public is one way.
Right.
You know, the law enforcement agencies' efforts to liaise with the communities and
Right.
provide that information is another way. So we're building on that, and again, we've started that as of recent, but are looking to scale that up quickly because we see a need for that across the community.
Sure.
And if I could just jump in, I think it should be noted that in our academy, in the Montgomery County Academy, they haven't trained chokeholds since over 20 years, since 2002, I believe.
Yeah.
So there needs to be education, but thanks.
And again, just to kind of elaborate more on what George was saying and the question from Councilman Lukey, that as we take a deeper dive at the beginning of this year, I think it will afford us with greater insight to provide with specific recommendations that will continue to help us build on the education of our community. Because again, you know, the statute or law can say whatever it wants to say, but the interpretation or the lack thereof of the community is a different thing. So
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of my team members is here, and we've been trying to figure out how to, like, there are so many things that the community, not necessarily related to this topic, but how to understand what is the landscape with a particular item, right? So our consumer protection folks were here just a little bit ago, and I had done some outreach with them on things that affect our elder population, for example, not public safety related, but that, again, you know, who do you know how to ask the question to, and how do you go and help them, empower them to know what the information is and how to use it. And that's a tough thing. And again, you guys are in the early phase of everything. So you've done a whole bunch of things straight out of the gate, which is wonderful. And I know you have a big journey ahead. But you know, any ways that we can help to try to get folks to understand the landscape in which we operate, like almost like Mythbusters for common public questions, right? We all know what the same recurring questions are over different topics, and you know, I feel like we have an obligation as the county government, as this body, as this public body that's an authority on this issue, to help answer those questions for them. And my final question is, oh, yes, sure.
I just wanted to add, I'm sorry not to,
Yeah.
I'm following Councilman Katz leading and interrupting. I apologize.
Sure. You don't need to apologize.
See, I'm not a good role model. You knew that, Bishop.
I knew that, right? It's not at all. Again, you just want to make clear that one of the things, again, main things is the foundation in which we're trying to build this house.
Right.
And the foundation simply is presence. The more we are visible to the community, the better this mechanism can begin to move in creating a mutual and reciprocal trust.
Right. Yeah.
Because people do not care how much you know until they find out how much you care.
Right.
That's a good
Exactly.
Right? So, and that's part of my outreach work that I do with what I do when I was asked to come and share this. So when people find out how much you care, that builds a trust. And then this presence and being consistent in that presence, and then having this dialogue, like this, we get more information that we can add to, our agenda and our arsenal to be able to build again this transparent, accessible board that may not have all the answers all the time,
Absolutely,
but at
yeah.
least we can say, if
Yeah.
you give us this amount of time, we can get back to you.
Yep. Yeah, nobody's expecting y'all to have all the things on the fly. Not a single soul in this room can do that on any topic, so I certainly appreciate that. The last question was with respect to...
You know what? I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, sir.
One more time.
Okay.
And something you said that was, I think, very, very insightful of you. We did have a regional PAB meeting in October of 2022, where a lot of our... 2023. Thank you. In 2023, October is a special day for me. So, but anyway, October 2023 in Anne Arundel County, the chairs from across the region, as well as the EDs from across the region, we did get together.
Good.
And you'll probably be seeing soon some of that regional PAB recommendations that we came together with as a regional chairs. That would be something that would even speak, to the state. Thank you.
Yep. And my last question is with respect to the questions about deployment from behavioral health cause. Did you all, when you were putting the report together, talk to EveryMind, which is our 988 receiving entity, or to the emergency call center at all to get feedback on protocols for dispatch of our clinicians?
So, no, they did not.
Okay.
But just so you understand, I know you talked about the regional, the PAB issued sort of a missive, right?
Right.
Asking for community organizations and groups to meet with them. So it wasn't so much that they were focused on any particular geographic location.
Right.
They had a meeting, and we had, the meeting notes out there published asking for any organization that may want to meet with them. And those are some of the ones who did reach out. They're not done, as they have indicated. They will continue to do their listening tour, and they will continue to do outreach to reach other organizations and community groups and in different regions of the county.
Right.
So it's not so much that they wanted to concentrate on a geographic location or group.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was just that there were. I mean, I know you only had time. There was a finite amount of time from the time they started till the report was done, right? So there's only so much you can squeeze in that time period. It's that the ones that got done first tended to be all more of one place.
And I'll add that in reference to that, one of the other things that we do to not local seem so niche to a certain part of the county is all of our meetings are not only virtual, of course, but we meet all over the county.
Right.
And the mandate says, we're once a month, but we do twice.
Right.
We do twice a month. And we're all over the county. And we really push, again, the invite and making it accessible to the residents of Montgomery County. And all can come at any time. As a matter of fact, we even have time when we listen and have public comment
Okay,
within our meetings.
excellent.
So again, we're really building this, and I think this year, as I said, earlier, we're envisioning that this is going to grow. We'll get better at it. We'll make some improvements and some strides. And the main thing is to make sure that the community know that we're here and what the difference is between us and
Right.
ACC.
Yes, all the acronyms, because it's an issue. And I think you answered the question on the ECC and 988, unless any of the Executive Director Barry answered the question, sorry. Unless one of the rest of you had a comment about that or about probing that further. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I do think it's a great idea about the statewide discussions, and I understand you've had regional, but statewide is probably something that MACO should help out on that one. And I also think it should be noted that we talk about statewide, and I mention this all the time, but as the council member for the 3rd District, both Gaithersburg and Rockville, population-wise, are bigger than a third of the counties in Maryland. Individually, are bigger than a third. So, we talk about the county boards, but one size is not anywhere. I mean, Montgomery County is by far the largest, and it's very different here than it would be in Garrett County. But they still could have a good idea on, how they've been able to accomplish. You asked to be back in the queue.
I did.
Yeah. See that? I made a note.
Thank you. And jump in anytime.
Yeah. I will.
Okay, so on another unrelated subject. Okay, so these bodies exist, right, as an effort to respond to the public's desire for greater transparency, greater accountability in this space, right? And in fact, we see in the PAB's report that desire is still being echoed by the public, right? Multiple participants in the listening tour urged greater transparency in policing. The ACC's work, though, is conducted in private, right? Understandably, they're doing very directly related personnel work. And so the PAB is our kind of related public-facing entity. So if the information about complaints and charges and so on, if it's not coming out of the PAB, it's not going to make it to the public, right? Because the ACC, as is inherent in their duties, their work is done in closed sessions. So, for example, we've got, of the 14 ACC decisions, 13 of the complaints that they looked at were found to be either unfounded or the officer was exonerated. In 3 cases, there was an administrative charge. So in reviewing those decisions, what information exactly does the PAB receive from the ACC? Kind of by default, like what does that packet look like? What exactly does it contain when that comes over for your review?
Again, we're such in a beginning stage, and that includes the ACC.
I'm sorry. Could you say? I'm sorry. What includes?
I'm sorry. What includes is about being in the beginning of this training, painting this move and train. That includes
yes,
the work of the ACC.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so far, what the PAB has received, of course, from the ACC thus far, has not been and correct me if I'm wrong, a completed report of the adjudicated cases for us to make an analysis and recommendations based on those cases. Some of them are still waiting for responses to those who are involved in the cases because they have to be notified of what the conclusions were. And once they are, they come back, and then that final report from the ACC is then sent up to the PAB for us to do our research, ask our questions, and to come up with some type of.
But for the oh, sorry.
I was going to say, if you can clarify that. So once the ACC actually has a finding, then you notify the person that had the complaint. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's what I'm saying, and I'll let DED kind of
Okay.
clarify more because she's the office that would make that.
So once a complaint is filed, just so I can do the clarification, once a complaint is filed by the public, that complaint either goes through the portal, the PABS portal, and they send it over to the LEA, or the person files a complaint directly to the LEA. The LEA completes the investigation. They transfer the investigative file to the ACC. The ACC reviews that investigative file. They make a determination one way or the other. At the end of it, they then send their decision to the LEA, the complainant, and the officer that's being accused. Every quarter, the ACC transfers the complaint and the decision to the PAB. And the PAB uses those two documents, those two things, per the law, which is what the law says, for them to review the complaint and the decision, the ACC decision, to determine trends. And as I'm sure you've seen in the report, and this group of people have done a lot of work in looking at the amount of information that they have received. I'm sure by next year there'll probably be more of a robust determination, or doing this year rather, because there are more complaints coming in from MCPD, more of a trend showing like a deeper end, but those are the two documents that they use to determine trends.
Go ahead.
Okay.
You're on the same track I'm on.
Okay. So to be clear, all the PAB receives is, let's say the complaint was one paragraph long. You receive that paragraph, and then you receive the decision, meaning administratively charged, exonerated, right? That's it. So it's like that. That's it. To be clear.
So just to be clear, the decisions are they're well-written decisions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No.
You're going to blame me for that?
We're all friends here.
You're going to blame me. Go ahead.
No, he's very engaged. He's very engaged in the whole process. Don't forget, he's the chair of both.
Of course.
So, the decision is pretty robust. It gives you the history of the case. It gives you a narrative of the complaint. It gives you a narrative of how the decision was made, and it gives you definitions of the different, and then it gives you what the final decision is. So it's pretty detailed. They may not receive the videos and all that, but that particular document is not just here's the issue and here's the decision.
Okay, great. So, yes.
And again, which she said exactly what I was interrupting her to say, and she was saying, which is when the PAB gets that report. Again, it explains the complaint, explains how the ACC actually reviewed and the case, how we determined that case, and then it explains, what the exonerated, unfound, and sustained means as well, and what the recommendation was. And from that, again, the PAB is where it then takes picks up that baton and says, okay, we'll delve a little deeper into the analysis of this case. Where does it fall in the line as far as race, gender, how often, as we look at these cases and the complaints, whether exonerated or not, or administratively charged or not, what are the parameters involving this case is what the PAB will do then after the ACC has submitted, those findings to us.
Thank you. So the part I'm interested in then would be the part where the ACC is explaining how they determined the outcome of the case, how they reviewed the case. So what's included in that? Like, for example, if the ACC is explicitly empowered to review any relevant body camera footage, whether or not it was included in the original investigative file that was handed over. They're empowered to request information or action from an LEA, including requiring additional investigation. They're empowered to issue subpoenas for documents or for witnesses, all of those things. So when something comes over, would an explanation of everything that was done be included in that packet, in the explanation of the decision?
I say that I say that one of the things that's important to understand is with the cases thus far that we're speaking of specifically is they weren't as complicated in reference to how we derived at the decision we did as an ACC. But we do, when we're doing our investigation or our review of the cases, if we find as a committee that there's something missing, right away we ask for that report, whether it's a body cam, whether it's an actual interview of the officer involved or the interview of the citizen.
And to be clear, when you say we, you're speaking as the ACC
I'm sorry, I'm
now.
speaking as the ACC now, yes. Because I sit on the ACC chair. I'm sorry, Councilman.
No, I just want to make sure for the public that
For the public, yes. So what the ACC does is, again, if we find that there's something missing in our review, no matter what the LEAs have sent over, we request that. Again, whether it falls into the line of, again, what interview happened with the officer or officers involved. We would want to see that interview or hear it if it was only by phone, or see it if it's by video. Let's say, usually in Montgomery County, depending on where an incident happened, it can involve two different municipalities. It could be Gaithersburg and MCPD answering the call, or Rockville. And so if whoever takes the lead, we want to see the other municipality's body cam. So we'll request that and see it from a different angle and different view. And usually, again, absolutely, when we make that report, you will see that in the report. This was a Rockville, it happened in Rockville, but MCPD was there to support or back them up. We requested the body cam from this specific officer who answered the call and support, and based on the Rockville's body cam, the MCPD's body cam, and their interview with their lieutenant or whomever it was, we concluded that this is where we ended up with this case, and that comes over in the report. To see that if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's helpful because, I'm thinking about the public, of course, which is the reason that that we put these pieces into place, and how we make sure they are aware that this type of due diligence is being done. Right now we look and we see, okay, there's 14 cases that have been looked at. 11 of them there was this outcome. 3 of them there was this outcome. But there's not any kind of explanation for the benefit of the public and the council and so forth about the type of due diligence that's happening currently that that we don't know about. But is that something that could be included, for example, in the dashboard or in some kind of public-facing fashion? Obviously, some of this, if it's a personnel record type of thing, then then we've got an issue there. But to know that, okay, the ACC, in making this recommendation, they went back and they requested these types of additional information, or this footage, or whatever the case may be. And additionally, if we're seeing a pattern of the ACC made that request because it's something that LEA perhaps should be doing, before it comes over, and maybe the LEA wants to consider making that part of their regular due diligence. That might be a type of pattern that the PAB would be interested in seeing as well. And so, I know that right now the PAB is looking for trends and findings related to just kind of, the outcomes and so on. But these are another kind of bucket of recommendations that I think would be helpful, would be information regarding the way investigations are being done internally, and then how the ACC is responding to that. And as well as, you know, if all of these policies are being followed, but the public thinks, wow, in a case like this, now this is harder to think about how you would present this in a public fashion without it stepping on kind of the personnel record situation, but I'll put it out there anyway. If we're seeing that this type of case with this type of situation is being either, exonerated or the charge is going through, and the public looks at that and says, that's ridiculous, it should be, this should not be happening, but that might require either a policy change or a legislative change. That's something that it would be a type of recommendation that it would be great to be getting from the PAB as well. But obviously, you would need to have all of the details about how the investigation was done and how those findings were reached. And we would want the public and for us on the council as well to understand that as well. And so that's kind of a big bucket that for me is really missing and is really important. So any thoughts on that would be great.
In reference to thoughts on that, we are in agreement with that as a path in making sure that we have these, of course, complete records of what steps were made to adjudicate these cases that were adjudicated from the ACC. The ACC, of course, side is we are. Our mandate is to make sure, again, we are transparent in how we've adjudicated these cases. Now, of course, the ACC has a public, I think it's acc.org, as well. The thing is, as you said, Council, we're talking about redactions now because we're talking about personnel things, so it's a little different than what you would see from the PAB.
Sure. I mean, redaction's totally understandable, but obviously we have Anton's Law in place, which makes a lot of these materials much more available.
Which we would see, I believe, more on the PAB side because they're completed cases. If I'm following you correctly, with you're concerned that we've picked up as well as a PAB. So as the PAB, we want to make this clear. We want to make it transparent on how not only was this case adjudicated from the ACC side, but what the trends and what we saw as a PAB in breaking down what work went into adjudicating these cases. Right. And, again, what the parameters were as far as ethnicities, communities, because that's all in how we as ACC, for the mental public, how we look at it as well when we're making these decisions on whether this is exonerated, whether this is sustained or in our thing. So yes, the PAB is picking up this, and I think from my periphery, I do see my parliamentarian raising his hand, so I'm gonna let him follow up with this. I got good peripheral for pressure.
Indeed. I'll just add that this is, as we know, all fairly new, and with regards to that, it's important to not conflate the PAB and ACC, which often happens, and that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation. Just as a matter of sort of going through your question, Councilman Mink, in terms of how robust is the ACC's investigation. I think that's something that the ACC, and I'll let the chair of the ACC add context to that. But as it relates to the ACC's operations, those are distinct from the PAB.
Of course.
Although they are interrelated, and I understand where you're coming from there. With that in mind, I would say that, as you mentioned, the PAB's goal is to assess the outcomes of these cases. So that's, I think, one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is how that case is investigated, which sort of belongs to the ACC. From my perspective, and I think this is something, like I said, that we're in constant conversations about, is how do we make it how do we communicate that, right? What is the ACC doing, and how does that differ from the PAB? What's the level of robustness across cases? And I'll leave that to the ACCs, but from the PAB side, in terms of analyzing trends and outcomes, we are sort of picking up what we are receiving from the ACC. So from our perspective, from the PAB's role in assessing the outcomes, the robustness of the investigation sort of still is, lives with the ACC. Our objective would be to understand the sort of holistically what the outcome is and report on all of the information that is available to us so that the members of the public are aware.
Thank you. And it looks like Bishop Walker, did you want to add, were you reaching for the button there? Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. She's very good at it.
Very gracious.
Yeah, very efficient.
Again, and I know here we were, for this Public Safety Committee, we were focusing on the PAD, but it's hard to do that without mentioning, the work of the ACC. Again, the ACC is very thorough in how we investigate these cases. We're very thorough in how we write up our decisions on these cases, and even in breaking down what steps we took to come up with these conclusions. And again, if we needed more record from another municipality that was actually on site, this officer's name, the resident, if we wanted even background information on a particular officer, in what their history of their record show, when was the last time that they had a complaint like this, which will help us understand where they are in the matrix and understanding these type of things. And we do explain that in our report once we write it up, and I guess make this alpine in our report and pass it up to the PAB. So it's a very thorough process. It's not something that we just dash through as an ACC.
Of course.
It's really thorough. Of course, the mandate, the law with the 30-day and the year and a day, and where we fall and how we fall into that as far as what records we receive in a timely manner. I have to say that with the ED's office thus far on the ACC side, when we request information, the executive director pushes very hard to make sure that we get what we are looking for in a timely manner to move us into to concluding, where we are in reference to this specific case. And I want to stay general because I don't want to get into the weeds of anything when it comes to the ACC and the investigations. But yes, we as of yet we have not had to exercise subpoena power because it's been a very cooperative effort and relationship with the LEAs. And any witnesses that we requested more information from. But again, which falls back to the point that things are starting to increase now, especially since July 1, 2023, and reason why we're really pushing the trial board effort, because we are expecting some of those any cases in the future to have this type of thing when officers say, well, no, I don't accept that.
Right.
So.
Well, it's great to hear about the collaboration, that you haven't had to subpoena and you've gotten everything that you needed in a timely fashion. And certainly I'm not surprised at all to hear you say that the ACC is doing their due diligence and is following up on all these different cases. My question is, for us to ponder is still, how do we make sure that the public is very clear that that is all happening? And how do we make sure that the PAB recommendations is able to consider potentially, some of the other points that I mentioned, in addition to some of the trends that we've discussed here, some of the trends in regards to, what the, whether the public is happy about what the outcomes are in some of these cases, and whether or not there may need to be a policy change to respond to that. Is there anything that comes over in the report that would, to the PAB, that would not be able to be made public legally?
So, what the PAB does and what they respond to, is literally just reviewing the complaint and the decision. They are not charged, and they cannot take information and provide it publicly.
Can the decision be made that PAB receives? Can that be made public? Because it sounds like that's pretty meaty, and it really does it sounds like explain some of the hard work that the ACC is doing, and it seems like there would be a lot of benefit to the public understanding that and seeing that.
So that's probably a conversation that I think we should allow the PAB to have outside of this for now to ponder
I
on
would
that.
ask that. I would ask, yeah.
However, be cognizant of the fact that even if that is put out, it will not be an actual decision. It may just be a template decision that tells the public what it is, because the PAB is not charged with putting out ACC decisions. They're not charged with putting out and publicizing complaints or written information. They are charged literally with reviewing the complaint and the decision and coming up with recommendations and publicly sharing trends that they may find in their review. I will hasten to not have them be charged with more than what they are mandated to do. I don't want us to have a conversation where they're being asked to publicly put out decisions or complaints by the ACC.
Thank you. Bishop Walker, did you want to comment on that?
No, I was in different wording, but I think I was saying the same thing as far as the pad and its heavy lift that we still have, and the legalities of what we can or can't put out as far as the ACC decision. That's something, again, we would ask that we would need to internalize and come back to as a board, as a PAB board, me, to even internalize and talk among ourselves, because it isn't a part of our mandate as far as the law. But we also have picked up a lot of things as a PAB that hasn't been a part of the mandate in our law because of our desire to reach out to the community. So if you would, again, just give us a moment in time, and maybe we can even invite you personally back on that question and sit in on with us, and we'll decide if that's a lift that we can lift legally and or time wise, if that's something we can
Sure, yeah, and again, this is, I'm just brainstorming of ways to get that information. I do think that there's a hole in terms of what the information is that is reaching the public about the work of the ACC and the PAB here, and so just thinking about what can be done to fill that gap. And so the easiest way, would be to take that decision, which has all of those pieces on it, and make that part of the reports. Obviously, that makes it a million times longer, but I'm just saying, like, hypothetically, that's a way that wouldn't require extra analysis. It would just be including there, or if there's particular parts of the reports that could be included, such as here's the things that the ACC requested. But that's food for thought for you and your legal counsel. I look forward to following up with you all, and if that not that, then what the ideas are for making sure the public is getting those pieces of information.
Thank you.
Good. Ms. Frog, I think we've answered every question and beyond. Oh, I'm sorry.
I was looking for
All right.
Put this on. Okay, so just so as we come to the end,
Okay.
I wanted the Public Safety Committee and at some point your peers to be aware of the hard work this board has put in, and I've only been with them since January last year, but I saw the work they did before I even got here, and they've continued to put in the time and the energy and the effort. Bishop already talked about the regional PAB meeting. They call it a regional PAB meeting, but really they invited different members of the different PABs around the state and wanted to come together to have conversations. And one of the conversations that they discussed was the year and a day rule that I know Councilmember Lutke has concerns about, and so do others. And they're considering that conversation. That conversation is being had as we speak. Just so you know that they are working hand in hand and having robust conversations with other PAVs and other groups. They are also working during during that meeting. There was a conversation about MACO and working hand in hand with MACO on to make sure that some of the concerns that they have and the other PAVs around the state have to get the support of MACO in putting things forward. So that idea, actually, they did have conversations about that, and they when they request additional staffing and resources, it's because they're diligently trying to make sure that information gathering happens, so that when they do make the recommendations like they have in this robust report they did, was to ensure that the public has all the information they need and you have all the information you need. Some of the things you talked about, Councilmember Mink, as you said, some of them probably would lean more towards legislative changes more so than what this volunteer board can probably do on their own. And so these conversations, I think, will be, great to continue to have. And I know that we appreciate the opportunity and we appreciate the fact that you're willing to listen. And just want to say I'm so proud of this board and part of the work they have done since I've been with them and the efforts they have made. And we look forward to more collaboration. And I know Bishop intends, he didn't say it, but I know he intends to work even more with the rest of the PABs around the state to make sure that some of the conversations they had during that meeting continues.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for everything you're doing. Not only should we mention, have a discussion with our friends from MACO, but in this case, we also need to have a discussion with our friends from the Maryland Municipal League, because this is the one, to my memory, ever that both groups have to have that discussion. And with that, Ms. Farag, I think we've answered every question beyond. Anything else to add?
No, I'll continue to work with Ms. Berry in order to prep for operating budget, and I can check with your offices to see if you have any specific questions for information gathering before that happens.
Okay. Very good. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it. And we look forward to this, to continue. I think this dialogue is important to help us reach and to, get to the point where it's first nature to continue to build a plane while we're flying and paint the train while we're riding. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Take care. We are adjourned.